What's up, numbers? Welcome back to another episode of Cineverse here on Hyper RPG. Hey! Here to talk about the movies. I'm very, very excited. Man, really interesting movies that we picked from last week.
Yeah, Annihilation, Mute, and Elizabeth's required viewing pick of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Which, from the time that was announced to now, a 4K has been announced. They're going to release a 4K Blu-ray of Space Odyssey, the 40th anniversary.
Excited.
So that'll be really cool.
I can't believe I didn't know that until I tweeted it to you or whatever, and you were like,
"Oh, I told you,
yeah."
I was like,
what the fuck? How did I not know this?
oh man. So very excited. I'm looking forward to talking about Annihilation. Up front, did not get time to see Mute.
It's okay.
You saw Mute?
I did.
Yeah,
I watched it today, or I tried to pay attention as much as I could, but it was a little bit of a slog.
Yeah. No, I didn't multitask. I watched the whole thing.
Did you really?
Yeah.
God bless you.
Here we go. We're going to get into it. Yeah. But first, we do have a couple of little movie things to talk about. First of all, since our last episode now, the Oscars had happened. Some of you probably watched along with us, so thank you so much for doing so.
That went real well.
Yeah, pretty much my predictions were dead on about Best Picture and Director.
Yeah. That was an easier year.
Yeah, there wasn't really the big... there was no real shocks, I guess, except for Deakins, and that was a happy shock that Roger Deakins had won cinematographer.
You had Hoytema, right? That was on your list?
I thought it was going to be Hoyt van Hoytema, yeah. But yeah, it ended up being Roger Deakins, and that was a pleasant surprise because the man's been nominated 14 times, and that was his first win, which
crazy.
Is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's insane.
And great that it was for Blade Runner. I was very happy about that because I thought Blade Runner looked amazing.
Yeah, it did.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, it was kind of one of those shows that was kind of like nothing really.
No real big surprises.
No.
All the acting categories, it was pretty much everything that had won up to that point, or all the people who had won up to that point. No real surprise there. I would say that I think director of photography was the biggest one, and I think a lot of people had the fingers crossed that it was going to be either Shape of Water or Guillermo, or just Guillermo and maybe Get Out, or maybe it was going to be Shape of Water for both. So it was kind of nice that they ended up both winning.
Yeah, Guillermo gave great speeches too.
He did.
But yeah, overall,
him checking the envelope was
was a great gif. That was really enjoyable. So yeah, overall, new Oscars down and on to next year.
Yep.
As this movie season just keeps going.
Yeah, I know.
And also, so right now, South by Southwest is happening. So we're hearing early responses. So we watched the trailer to this a while ago, but Heredity had a viewing. Hereditary, and people went crazy for it.
Yeah.
In a big way. So really excited about that one. And also, I guess it's worth saying, Ready Player One had its screening, which... it went well by all accounts. Not technically. I guess there was a point where twice, the sound went cut out.
Wow.
Both times, or 2 times in a row, pretty quickly. But what ended up happening then? But I guess the response was huge praise. And then once you kind of took a step back and really looked at it, it was huge praise from a lot of 40-year-old straight white men who probably got into film writing because of Steven Spielberg in the first place, and Steven Spielberg was there in person, and a lot of female critics walked out going, "It's fine."
Well, like, even if you don't love the source material, which people seem to be pretty split one way or the other on, I mean, Steven Spielberg, he's a great director.
Oh, yeah.
So
and
it's going to be competently done.
Yeah. I mean, and I do. I hope the movie is good, but it's very interesting to me where people are like, "Oh man, this is what we thought," and then look at the response in the room, and I'm like, "Yeah, with Spielberg there in person."
Yeah.
Mostly made up of people who got into this industry probably because of Steven Spielberg films. What were they going to do? Boo him and throw paper plates?
Exactly. And plus,
that's a new one. Is that a thing?
Yeah, like a frisbee.
Well, yeah, for me going into it, it's like I really liked the first trailer, and it was a good time at Comic-Con seeing Steven Spielberg there to talk about the movie and all that sort of stuff. But then everything else from the marketing has really sort of been like a real big miss with me. The posters specifically, Jesus Christ, those posters are terrible.
Did you see those posters? The recreation of 80s film posters?
I don't know that I did.
Oh, you keep talking now.
They're such dog poo-poo. They're terrible. And I'm like, man.
And that's the thing. Let's say marketing is very different than an actual film. You can have great trailers of bad movie.
Yeah.
Bad, boring trailers that then, oh my God, this film is great. And they didn't know how to market it. I will say the marketing for this movie is not great. If I was Steven Spielberg, I would probably be going to Warner Brothers to be like, what are you doing?
Yeah. What is this?
Because right now, tracking for the film before South by Southwest, if South by Southwest maybe has changed things, tracking right now for the film to open is at $30 million on opening weekend, which is very bad.
Goddamn. For a Spielberg movie, that's like low.
Yeah, and for a movie that's supposed to be this hotly anticipated.
Right.
So I think a lot of that is on marketing. I think there's a sect of internet audience who's very loud and looking forward to this movie, and I think you want a 4-quadrant movie when you spend this much money on it, and I think there's a majority of people who are just like, I don't know what this. I don't even know what it is. I think that's the thing that's worth saying. If you're not familiar with that book, I don't know if the trailer tells you what these things are, other than like it's a virtual reality world where everything is, and you're kind of like, okay, but what's the story? Why am I doing this? And it was actually, I think, on Screen Junkies, a guest on there whose name I can't recall at the moment, made a really good point, is that they should be marketing this like Avatar. Whereas Avatar was like, you'll enter this being and you're in this world and this thing happens, and people were like, I want to know what that is. Yeah. Whereas the trailer for this is like, do you like Back to the Future and Batman
and Chucky?
And there might be a lot of people in the audience who are like, no.
Well, do I have a movie for you?
From the director of not those things.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah, I still even now, like, there are still things about the advertising that I just like. I'm not crazy about. The last trailer I wasn't crazy about either. So to hear that people were coming out of South by Southwest and generally liking it, there's that argument of like, well, it's a very select audience that likes that movie. But yeah, I'm still not on board with it. And I don't think that anything is going to convince me other than the movie itself when it comes out.
Yeah, and I'll say that if the movie's good, great. I want every movie to be good because we're paying money to go see them. And so I want every movie to be good. And I love Steven Spielberg. I never went through the phase that I think a lot of people in our age group seem to have gone through, which is Spielberg, he makes, nice movies that our parents and blah, 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 but they're not edgy and they don't go for the gut and blah, 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 blah. That I think a lot of film people go through, especially in college. I never went through that. Like, I've always loved Spielberg movies.
Same.
So for me, yeah, I want it to be good. I want to love it. But I will say, if it ends up being great and I'm like, wow, it was great, I also have no problem going, the book is still trash.
Yeah. Did you like Tintin?
I really like Tintin a lot.
Same. Did you?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
So these are some of that's the Labyrinth poster. And if you just keep swiping, you can see some of the great ones.
You'll see the hot mess.
There's Rambo, and there's a Matrix one, and Blade Runner.
They're just so they feel. I think that's the other thing too, is they feel very cheaply done. Because when Cameron showed it to me, I thought it was fan art. I didn't know that this was real put out by the studio. It looks like fan art.
It does look like fan art.
It totally does, which is kind of disappointing. I'm like, man, if you're already gonna put in the effort and the money to make those.
Well, I'm sure that's what they wanted it to look like.
Yeah.
They wanted it to look like fan art, done professionally. But...
Hot mess. But I mean, it's at least some of the reception has been good. But
yes,
we won't know. The other one is the John Krasinski movie, Quiet Place.
That has gotten also rapturous. That's John Krasinski. Did he write it as well and direct it?
I believe he wrote and directed it. Yeah.
It's him and Emily Blunt. Cute story. They're a real couple in real life, and they made a movie together. It's apparently a crazy as shit horror movie. That people in South by Southwest are going, which I actually appreciate that a couple made a movie, and it's not a movie where they're like, look how this is what you get a lot in Hollywood. You get one or two films when a real life couple does a movie together. Like, if they weren't a couple before the movie and then they became a couple after the movie, that's different. But if it's like, we've been married for 3 years and blah, 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 and here's our movie, you get either their version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which is like, we're fighting! And one of them is also the writer or the director or the producer. Or you get like some kind of like, we're trying to do a throwback to an old romance film because we love each other in real life.
Or if it's their first, you get a Look How We Met.
Look How We Met, yeah.
Which, how do you know they didn't?
I know, yeah. Oh, yeah. They did meet in this awful, horrific place where John Krasinski hunted Emily Blunt down like a madman.
Traumatic bonding.
That would be amazing if that's what that movie was.
But yeah, so that's been getting a great response. That's coming out soon.
The trailer's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was a good trailer.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And actually, we did have some other trailers drop during the Oscars. Mary Poppins. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Emily Blunt.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, that one's like. The cinematography looked kind of dark, and I don't mean like underlit. I mean just like they film it almost like it is kind of like a horror movie.
Yeah.
And I when I said that, some people are like, "You should read the books," and I'm like, "Fair," but this is supposed to be acting like a sequel to the original film.
I'm interested. Like, I understand the why of it.
Yeah.
Like, I also have that question, but it does seem like it is one of those gritty reboot type things because they're adults.
Yeah.
And it's much darker seeming, and maybe they have some commentary to make on that could be interesting.
I wouldn't mind that. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of this director's other work. Rob Marshall, who also did Chicago, which is his first movie, which is good. But then after that, he did.
That was his first movie?
I think so. And then he did 10, the Daniel Day-Lewis musical, which is supposed to be based... 9.
9.
The Daniel Day-Lewis is supposed to be based off 8.5, which wasn't great.
And then
I didn't see that, but I heard
Pirates
it wasn't great.
4.
The fourth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, and Memoirs of a Geisha. Like, his movies really look nice, but I kind of a director where it's like the scripts never feel more than what they are. Even Memoirs of a Geisha I feel like that should have been a bigger deal and a better movie.
Huh.
It was fine. Like, I feel like that's the thing. I think I walk out of every Rob Marshall movie, except for Pirates 4, going like, that's fine.
And who did the script for it?
That's fine. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I will look into that. But I mean, Emily Blunt's great casting. I was a friend of ours said that with Lin-Manuel Miranda in it, does that mean there's going to be a rap song? And I didn't even think about that. And now I'm like, oh no.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
But now I can't help but think it.
I think if he's in that movie, it's because he loves the original and kind of wants to do some twist on the original, not be like, hey, I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda. This is the one thing I can do.
Let me drop a beat right now.
Yeah.
That'd be very interesting. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, as a teaser trailer, it was fun. It was a fun little teaser. She did sound very much like Julie Andrews in that like closing shot. Which I'm like,
The screenwriter is David McGee, who also did Life of Pi. He did the adaptation of Life of Pi.
Okay.
And I love Life of Pi, but that's an example. Ang Lee as a director is a guy where it's like, man, if he makes a movie, even if the script kind of feels, and I don't think Life of Pi is this kind of script, but if the script even is kind of like, oh, this is okay. I think Ang Lee's a director who's like, let's dig into this. Let's find some stuff. God, I love Ang Lee's movies. But yeah, and so I think that was the big stuff that we haven't really talked about. A couple trailers, award shows, and things of that nature.
Did you see the Ang Lee movie that he did 120 frames in like 3D?
I have that 4K. I have not watched it yet, which is the life.
But it's probably not in high frame rate, is it?
I don't believe so. Yeah, the life and the long walk of something or other. The character's name is. I can't remember. With Vin Diesel in it as well, and Steve Martin. What a cast. And so I guess also on the Hero Click show, someone asked if we were talking about this. So it does look like Danny Boyle will be directing the next James Bond movie.
That was the thing that I was thinking of. That
even Danny Boyle hinted pretty hard that he's going to be doing it. That's great. I love Danny Boyle.
Same. I think Danny Boyle's great. He's also going to be co-writing it or writing it.
I don't know. I
think
haven't heard that one.
Because he's doing a movie right now, which is in a pre-production phase that's going to go into production in next month or so. His plan is hopefully to shoot the next Bond movie by the end of the year, but I think part of it depends on the script. So,
well, Danny Boyle's pretty quick as a director. His last movie was Trainspotting 2, which me and Elizabeth both loved from last year. I really liked his Steve Jobs. I would say Danny Boyle for me is way more hit than miss. I like Slumdog Millionaire a lot, and I think a lot of people. I think he kind of went through the Spielberg thing where he did Slumdog Millionaire and started getting nominated for Oscars because then he did 127 Hours and these other films, and I think a lot of people started to write him off as like,
hey, it's not cool anymore.
He's not cool and hip anymore. He doesn't do movies about heroin addicts and murderers. And then he did that movie that was actually not really good, but with James McAvoy and Rosario Dawson.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forget the name of it.
Trace or Trance or something like
Trance.
that.
I think it's Trance.
And it just wasn't good on a script level. There's too many things where you're sitting there going, wait, what? But that, a lot of people were like, from the trailer, a lot of people were like, oh, Danny Boyle's back doing thrillers. And then the movie came out and people were like, oops, this wasn't good. And there's also it was one of those interesting things where, I mean, whatever, but like Rosario Dawson, they were dating at the time, her and Danny Boyle.
Yeah.
And there was a scene where it's like full frontal nudity because there's a big dialogue sequence in the movie about what it means to shave your pussy and all this other stuff. So then she does it in the film, and then the camera does this thing, and she walks out fully frontally nude with the shaved vagina. And you're just like, wow. And I'm like,
Weird.
well, it's not Slumdog Millionaire, everybody. Y'all thought he turned into a big old wimp, but look at him now.
He's not playing to the Oscars.
You don't give a shit about your Academy Awards no more.
God.
And then he does Steve Jobs and then Trainspotting too. So I'm excited by that. And this looks like it might be Daniel Craig's last one by all accounts.
That wouldn't surprise me. He's over 50 now, so.
Yeah. How many of the Craig films have you watched? The Bond Craig films?
I think only the first couple.
Like Casino Royale and
Yeah.
It was Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and Spectre.
Yeah. So this will be his fifth one. And I'm happy he's doing that. I was not huge. Spectre had some good moments, but I was overall not huge on Spectre. So I kind of hope that he can go out on, even if it's an okay Bond movie, that it's an okay Bond movie.
To be honest, I was actually pretty disappointed with Spectre, considering how I really like Skyfall.
Yeah. It's generally pretty disappointing, but the train fight with Batista was pretty good.
Yes. Yeah.
There's some moments.
There's moments in that movie, but I thought compared to Skyfall, I was really surprised how much of like a dip it took in quality. But it kind of did that. Like, I love Casino Royale, and Quantum of Solace did the same thing. Granted, different director, Mark Forster from... the director of Casino Royale was Martin Campbell.
Martin Campbell, yes.
I thought the quality went down quite a bit. But I feel like that's kind of been a trend. It's like every other movie is really good.
There's a lot of films. There's a lot of film series that kind of follow the Star Trek model.
Yeah.
Where it's like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad.
Yeah. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this will be the good one.
This is a good one. But yeah, that's the major stuff. So I think we can get on to our required viewing and our reviews. So our required viewing was Elizabeth's pick. Elizabeth, what did you pick?
2001: A Space Odyssey.
Now, what made you decide to pick this to pair with the two films we're talking about?
Well, I think obvious reasons.
Yes.
I mean, there's classic sci-fi, and I think Annihilation in certain sequences owes a lot to 2001. A lot of people have pointed that out. And I think just thematically and visually and just with the score and sound, so many sci-fi films owe so much to that movie. And I really love it. I know some people are annoyed by it, and I get that.
I think we're finding, to compare it to Annihilation, you're finding a very strong divide. And I think there's a strong divide on 2001 where people are like, I love it, and people are like, I don't get it. It's pretentious and it's slow.
Well, 2001, and we'll save Annihilation, but
we will.
2001 it's kind of all artistic and kind of there's how much dialogue is in that film? Not much.
In 2001?
Yeah.
I mean, the first, maybe the first 20, 25 minutes, none.
Yeah, and then the middle section has dialogue.
Where it's the first
9000.
Well, even before HAL, there's a little bit. I think most of the dialogue.
There's a little bit. It's basically there's a scene where they talk about the Russian.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then after that, it's the main characters that everyone knows.
Yeah, the first group of scientists is probably where the most dialogue is. Their first mission, and then when you meet.
But that's not a very long scene.
It's not a very long scene, but that might be where the most dialogue is.
And then the dialogue after that people remember the most is Hal and Dave.
Yes.
And Frank, and after that. It's just back to images and sounds again.
Yeah. I love this movie. I love 2001. I've seen it many times at this point. Although probably my best experience, and a big O to Elizabeth on that one, we saw it at the Hollywood Bowl with the orchestra.
Where they, played the score.
And I think at that point it had already been remastered into the 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. And that was so dope to hear like a live orchestra play. Because again,
one thing that's interesting is because with a full orchestra you have, and this is they used I forget the composer's name, but I know the piece that you hear for the Monolith, he was not happy about them using it.
Really?
But I think that was a recording where it's like he doesn't get to say because it's owned by the record company because it's a composition from the. But I just remember him like having an issue. But there are moments where there's no music and no dialogue. So there's 100-something musicians just sitting on stage, and all they hear is. Because they don't get to see the screen for like 15 minutes.
That was its own kind of secondary game where you're watching these musicians. Some of them are like drinking water. I'm pretty sure you pointed out to me one of them was reading a novel.
That's
so
amazing.
That was its own show within a show. Is when all this like great dramatic soundscaping stuff is happening that they're not a part of.
But
Just reading.
I don't know. It's such a. And I also know a lot of people don't like Kubrick that much, I found. And I really like his films. And I love how it just kind of starts with these vignettes.
Yes.
And then the monolith is this theme that implies something larger. He doesn't explain anything. There's nothing that you get today where you have one character where they're like, well, you know, it's like how humans sometimes go through a change like this. My daughter, for instance, and gives you some metaphor that explains the plot of the movie. No one does. There's none of that at all.
I think a big part of that, too, is credit due to Arthur C. Clarke, the writer of the book who wrote the screenplay with Kubrick. If anybody reads Clarke, and I love Arthur C. Clarke's stuff, it's one of those things that for me, reading his stuff, I don't know how else to describe it. It's almost like how when some people describe watching sports or something like that, where you kind of get into this calm Zen state. Clarke's work does that for me. They're not very, like if you read Rendezvous with Rama and all this other stuff, the plot is literally, it's almost a 400-page book, and it's like, hey, there's this giant thing in space. It's like some kind of spaceship, but no one knows the technology. The astronauts go to it and they explore it, and oh my God, look at all this like inhabitants, and there's grass, and the gravity's weird. Time to go. End of the book. There's not like aliens and a shootout and all this other stuff. And it's so calming. And I think him and Kubrick working together on this film creates, if you love this movie, creates this kind of state where it's like this, you just kind of let the film wash over you. I never find it boring. It's one of those movies like you have to pay attention, but not because you're like, oh, if I miss this line of dialogue, I won't know what's happening.
I mean, there are a few lines of dialogue that give you the plot, but
yes.
So you kind of do have to catch this.
Yeah.
But especially the Russian mission and how that connects to Frank, Dave, and how like if you walked out for a minute, then you would totally lose that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. I mean, because it's got 3 acts, and just how they play the Emperor Waltz, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So it's the Emperor Waltz that plays, that we hear them probably the most in the movie, I think. And that's every time there's like anything that because that's such a dancey piece that you would never think of putting in space. But it first happens when a monkey, to show the evolution of using tools, throws this bone in the air and it spins, and then you see this huge spacecraft, just this eloquently designed circular spacecraft just spinning in space, and you have this waltz theme, and then everyone on board is very civilized, and then the waitress is walking upside down while this theme plays and preparing food and coffee, and like that just goes on for a long time.
Yeah.
And just kind of these statements just by juxtaposing music and imagery and context.
Well, I think that's the special effects for this film were done by Douglas Trumbull, who was like the guy at that time. And like 2001 was a movie that made people go like, Holy crap. And Douglas Trumbull was the guy who then I believe George Lucas went to and was like, hey, we want to do my movie, this little Star Wars thing. And Douglas Trumbull was like, you need to give me this much time and this is how meticulous it's going to be. And he was like, I can't.
Never mind.
We can't do that. This is kind of a quick thing.
Yeah. This is a weekend project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies where it just seems like every little thing worked. The special effects, the music, the directing, and Kubrick famously is a very meticulous, do 800 takes until I get it right.
Yeah.
And this was back in the day when they had to use film. There was not digital cameras.
That shit costs money.
Yeah, really, really, really meticulous. And for me, it paid off.
Yeah,
especially in this film, but his other films as well.
I was kind of late to the game when it came to 2001: A Space Odyssey. I didn't see it until I was, I think, like a junior or senior in high school, and it took me a little bit of time to kind of get through it because it is a slower movie. But as I grew older, I really learned to appreciate that movie and technically like how incredibly well it's made. And then I went back to revisit it after Interstellar came out because you saw Interstellar and Christopher Nolan, that's all he talked about was how 2001 was such a huge inspiration for the movie Interstellar. And then after going back and rewatching it, after seeing Interstellar, yeah, like it's very, very clear. Like even some of the shot composition, some of the concepts and how he photographs the spaceship going through space, very similar to a lot of stuff in 2001. And it is a slow movie, but I kind of like that. And I also feel like people... when we label movies pretentious, I feel like people don't understand the difference between what pretentious really is and what creating art is. And I feel like Stanley Kubrick is more about creating art and sort of letting the visual of the movie tell the story instead of doing the thing of like, here's a plot, here are the characters, here's this, here's that, like explaining everything to you. And I think a lot of people just sort of get lost because they assume that everything's going to be spoon-fed to them. Right. Through dialogue instead of just like you said, let the movie wash over you and just absorb it and think about the movie and what the movie's about and the themes and the characters and all that sort of stuff. But it's such a beautifully photographed movie. Like it's one of my, if not maybe, it could be probably my favorite sci-fi movie. It's so incredibly well done. The music's great, the editing is great, but just what they're able to do with the visual effects in, it's the late 60s. It's like the movie's being made in 67, 66, 67, comes out in 68, I think, or 69. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's really amazing. I really would like to go to the Egyptian to see the remaster because I'm sure it looks incredible. And now it's coming on 4K.
Yeah.
My God.
Well, I think what you said too is like, I think it's important. Pretentious, which is a word, just basically means like pretend you're full of crap. You're pretending to know something or do something and be lofty about it. And I think the thing, because Kubrick is so meticulous, he only did things that actually interested him. That never came across like horse shit.
Yeah.
It never came across like he was doing something and trying just to be lofty. It was like, you got the impression like, oh no, this actually is the shit that interested him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing for me when it comes to that movie is there's not a lot of dialogue. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's definitely a movie that you just sit there and you just are studying the frame. And I think that's so like, I love movies that do that. We don't get enough of that nowadays. Mm-hmm. And I like movies that just sort of let you sit. Like even Interstellar, to an extent, there is a lot more. There's an insane more amount of dialogue compared to 2001. But there are also things about that movie, especially watching in IMAX, you're kind of just studying the scene and how it sort of takes its time. But 2001 does that on like a 10th level compared to what that movie is. And
right.
I don't know. I really just was, I remember seeing it the first time just being blown away at the composition and how things are framed and how it looks, and especially the pacing. The pacing was a big thing for me because I think we all, by that point, by the time I was in high school, I was so used to seeing sci-fi movies that were just action, 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 action.
Yeah.
We were in the era of the Star Wars prequels, which was all action. Star Trek was coming out. So that's sort of what people got used to. So going back and seeing a movie that, especially the beginning, like it's very slow, like showing you evolution and all that sort of stuff. But if you go back and you rewatch it, I think it gives you sort of an appreciation of how filmmakers, before a certain time period, really like to let movies sort of breathe, and I kind of miss that, and that's why I really love this movie so much.
I will say, like with the slowness, he paces it in a way that surprises you, both in the scenes in the house at the end and the chimps at the beginning. You have these like longer cuts with sound, and then all of a sudden there'll be a fast cut and the sound drops out, and you're just kind of like, whoa, because like you were in such this vibe of going with the movie, and he does that for a reason, and he catches you off guard, and like will suddenly like split the time that you've gotten used to going from scene to scene, cut to just cutting it in half, and then just jolting you out of it. So he uses it to get a rise out of you, almost as if there was like sudden dialogue that threw you.
So yeah, that's 2001: A Space Odyssey, guys. You gotta make sure you go check it out if you haven't yet. I'm sure it's on some streaming service.
It was on Netflix for the long. I watched it on Blu-ray, but I know it was on Netflix for the longest time. Then it left and it came back. I don't know if it's there right now, but if it is, yeah, definitely watch it. It's really good.
Have any of you seen 2010, the sequel, Odyssey 2?
I have not.
I haven't.
I have. It's fun, but it is kind of what we're talking about, the opposite beat, where it's like Roy Scheider, who's great. It's directed by Peter Yates, but it's very much like we think this mission went. You got to go up there and find it. All right, that's all these astronauts, and there's a ton of dialogue and kind of. But I do like it, but it feels. You could tell this is a guy who would then go to do Outlander, the
Can I be honest with you?
Sean Connery film.
I had no clue that there was a sequel to that movie until like I think when I was in high school. Never had any clue.
It's worth it. It's worth a bump. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable, like B+ kind of movie.
Mid-80s.
Yeah. So like almost 20 years after the first one. But yeah, if you've seen 2001: Space Odyssey and agree or disagree, let us know in the comments. And if you haven't checked it out, do, and then let us know what you think. So moving on, let us go on to Mute, because I haven't seen it. And I think we'd have a deeper discussion, debatably, about Annihilation.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see Mute?
Yes.
Okay, so I going into it, I was actually really looking forward to this movie.
So actually, let's say Duncan Jones.
Yes.
We watched the trailer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seemingly in the Moonverse.
You can watch us react to the trailer.
Yep. It's definitely in the Moonverse.
We were not.
We were muted reaction.
Yeah. We were not crazy about the trailer. No. It came out. You would think it was about. If you would just go to Netflix, you would think it was a movie about Paul Rudd and a crazy mustache, because that's all the images that they're showing is Paul Rudd and a mustache. So how is Mute?
Here's the thing with Mute. So again, going into it, I was excited. It's Duncan Jones, Alexander Skarsgård, Paul Rudd.
Something he's had in his mind forever.
Yeah. And obviously set in this futuristic setting. You get a little bit of backstory as to why the movie is called Mute. Alexander Skarsgård gets like hit by a propeller of a boat, and it like damages his basically just he gets complete damage and he loses his voice, so he can't talk. And his family is very religious, and his mother,
they're meant to be Amish, right?
Amish, I think so. Yeah, that's at least the vibe that I got.
That's what I've read. So
yeah, very much against having him have any sort of surgery to repair it. So basically, the movie picks up 30 years later in this like dystopian future. He's now a bartender at the bar, and he's in a relationship with this woman who's also a bartender.
And it's meant to be future Berlin.
Yes. Berlin. I had high hopes for this movie because I really love Moon. I didn't get a chance to see Warcraft yet, but I really enjoyed Moon. So I thought, okay, cool. He's going back to doing a different type of sci-fi. Sort of. I thought it's going to be sort of more like Moon and a little maybe less fantasy like World of Warcraft, but I was pretty bored in this movie.
So this movie has a lot of interesting ideas in it.
Yeah.
And a lot of interesting designs in it, but it feels so disjointed and odd. Mm-hmm. It has all these little like sub stories and developments that don't completely make sense or pay off. It almost feels like we're watching a series of vignettes that aren't necessarily connected. I guess the main character has a through line, but then we kind of lose it and then get it back in a weird way, and then it keeps going. It almost feels like if there was a popular book series that was a sci-fi noir series of novels, and someone's just like, I'm just going to pick my favorite pages and make them into a script, and whatever that script is, we're gonna film it. Is how it feels. It's
totally.
Yeah.
It does. It totally feels like that, because you feel like you get to a section of the movie and then you're like, feels like a chunk's missing. A little chunk is missing in between like the next part.
Yeah, and then this guy will show up who you saw as like, I think it's her best friend, and then he has a job that's confusing and some science fiction thing, and they don't completely explain it, and also he hates the main character and we don't know why, and then he disappears, and then that's never mentioned again. And then
I feel like there was also just like too many character stories to follow. It's
way
like
too many characters.
Paul Rudd and his friend, and they're like, Paul Rudd has a subplot. You find out that his like friend who he served with, like, he has a subplot. He ends up being they basically
3/4 of the way through the movie, which is like what, over 2 hours.
Like just over 2 hours.
We discover that he's a doctor and probably a pedophile.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Rudd or the other
No, the other guy. Yeah.
And then Paul Rudd's just like shoves him against the wall and is like, no, man, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You got to quit your job, and I'm going to set you up to have my house because I'm going to America, and you can't work with kids ever again. Okay. And then he's like, oh, I love you, man. And then they hug each other and both start crying.
And then he beats the shit out of him.
Yeah.
And then later on he like beats him up about it, and then like Alexander Skarsgård and him and Paul Rudd have like a fight, and he shoves a knife through his throat, and then his friend's like, I can't take you to the hospital because people are going to ask questions, so I guess I'm just going to let you lay here and die. And I'm like, what? What is happening in this movie?
Yeah, it's very like, it starts off with Alexander Skarsgård's character looking for his girlfriend, who we know nothing about except that they work at the same futuristic club in Berlin, and that she seems nice.
Yeah. And then takes a turn, and you're like, oh. She
disappears.
Yeah.
And then he's looking for her. And it's weird because, like, his girlfriend seems like, I don't know, mid-30s, and he's like showing her picture, and everyone's just like, well, I don't know, she didn't show up for work today. And then he's like immediately in panic mode within like 8 hours of not seeing her, which is already a little weird. I mean, like, he's like full on, like, you know, like, I'm on a mission mode within 8 hours of, like, she said goodbye and didn't show up for work the next morning. He's like punching people. Yeah. So.
Yeah. He gets like in a fight with Robert Kaczynski's in the movie, who's also in Warcraft. He plays like, again, it's like another set of characters that have another subplot. There are these guys basically who are getting these documents for Paul Rudd's character, and it's all interconnected.
And that's all very confusing.
Yeah.
And then they're in some like underground illegal sort of bizarre kind of place.
Yeah.
Do you think, now having not seen it, like, is there a degree of like film noir are almost famously convoluted plot wise? Like, the people talk about, like, I can't remember which Humphrey Bogart movie it is. Maybe it is The Big Sleep, but even the screenwriter was like, yeah, this doesn't make sense.
But it's like too many ideas.
Yeah.
It's like a vomit draft of a script where it's just like, you've been too close to this and this needs edited. Like it's just all over the place. Like, I could see how if this was restructured that they're going for a Fifth Element kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that arc. It doesn't make sense in that way. A lot of things are left undone. There's scenes that don't lead to each other. There's stuff that just should have been taken out. We don't see enough of certain things, like their relationship or even the girl, to care about her.
I will say, I'm like, this character, we see this character, I think it's like the first 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we don't see her until the very, very end, and she's dead at the end. Spoiler. And I'm like, I never cared enough to be like.
We knew he cared, but like, we didn't really get why, because we didn't like see, and I know flashbacks are cheap, but we didn't even get flashbacks of their relationship to show why he cared so much.
And even the whole like subplot with the Paul Rudd character and how we find out that he poisons her and then takes her. And so Paul Rudd has a kid in the movie, and the kid ends up being the kid of Alexander Skarsgård's girlfriend.
Oh, and they set up this whole thing where he's like following these leads where it's like meant to look like her job was shady, and like it went all the way to the top of this like conspiracy theater where she's not a hooker, but like the girls at the club are being used for messengers and some illegal underground futuristic ring. And then it's just like, no, Paul Rudd, who we've been following this whole time, just killed her.
Yep.
You know, we didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
They had some relationship that we haven't mentioned for almost 3 hours now. Anyway, they had this relationship and now she's dead.
It's just it's going back and forth between so many characters, so many plot points, and I'm like, man, this could have been so streamlined.
I'm not interested in I'm not uninterested in the ideas. I'm not uninterested in the characters or the design. It was just put together in such an odd way.
A little sloppy. Yeah. And one of the things that I did tell Cameron, like, I like the performances from some of the actors. Like, I thought what Alexander Skarsgård did, playing a character, like a mute character, and how most of his work is all done through expression and visual emotion. Like, I thought it was done well. Paul Rudd being sort of this, like, real slimy asshole, which we don't really see a lot of Paul Rudd doing that. It was kind of nice to see him do something different. But I feel like it was wasted. It's wasted because it's just surrounded by dialogue and a story that you kind of just don't care about.
Right.
You're not invested in it, which sucks because it was a cool world. There were cool concepts in there, and it had little, like, Fifth Element, Blade Runner vibes to a lot of it. But that's it. There was no, like, there's no layers to it. It was all just very surface level sort of substance.
Do we know, is this similar to Cloverfield? Was this a case where another studio had the movie and then they gave it to Netflix, or did Netflix from the ground up?
I don't know 100% because I think it was set up at another studio. I don't know if it was Paramount, but it did end up jumping to Netflix. But I don't know how early or how late that was. I think it was early.
So maybe this is something we're talking about too. Like with this and Cloverfield Paradox and some of these movies, that's like, oh, big director, big names, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And then the movies come out and everyone's like, ugh. Like, are we kind of getting to the point where Netflix, are we near the point where, you know, straight to VHS was in the mid 90s, where something's like straight to Netflix and people go, oh, that's going to suck.
I hope not.
I mean, Beast of No Nation was great, but I feel like, and here's the thing, Netflix buys like everything right now, but I'm kind of wondering if all the big profile movies, Bright, Cloverfield, Mute, are movies that for the most part, people are like, these suck, are like, is Netflix going to be like, the new good Netflix stuff is the documentaries and TV shows?
Well, yeah. Well, some of these are just movies that couldn't get, I mean, it's very hard for strange movies to get produced.
Sure.
So I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case, because when we're talking about straight to VHS, you had more of a chance to get produced. Not like it was easy, but like there was more opportunities than there is now.
Yeah. Plus, I think all the movies that you mentioned, Mute, Bright, and Cloverfield, those are kind of high concept sci-fi movies.
Well, I also wonder though, because they're also high profile.
Sure.
Like, Netflix puts out like new movies every week, but the ones that they get behind, it's like, here's the trailers and posters. And if we drive down Sunset, you're going to see billboards. It's those three that, yes, they are sci-fi. There's also that degree of like, they're the ones they're pushing real hard. And it's that thing of like, if the ones you're pushing really hard, everyone mostly goes like, and then with Bright, they have to like release articles where it's like, I guess critics just didn't get it. Look how many views it got. And I'm like, a month later, no. Like, if you walked up to people and said, are you excited for Bright 2? I think most people would go, oh, no.
No, yeah. I agree. And I
the Adam Sandler stuff, all the Adam Sandler stuff.
Yeah, and I don't want Netflix to become that. I don't want Netflix to be, and I'm sure they obviously don't want that either. They don't want to be the place where movies go to kind of die. Movies that the studios are like, let's give it to Netflix or Amazon because we think they're lesser. They're these lesser sort of entities, and
like, we're not going to make money. No one's going to want to see this. Word of mouth's going to be bad. Just dump it on Netflix.
Exactly. Whereas, you know, with their TV stuff and their documentaries, I also feel like Netflix, maybe it's by choice, I don't know. I feel like Netflix is a lot more involved in TV and documentary stuff in terms of helping those filmmakers sort of get those projects going. Whereas the movie stuff, it's kind of like, we'll just take it. I'm like, do you want to become that studio that just takes things that the quote unquote big studios don't want? I mean, I don't know.
Well, it could also just be a transition period for them, where you take stuff to build that before you start sort of investing yourselves.
Yeah,
I'm curious too with this and Bright and Cloverfield, because I would imagine that the big reason why, you know, Bright, there was such a big push. Cloverfield, I mean, it was a day of push, but it was they did their best to really push that movie out. And with this, I don't feel like this really had a huge
I've seen a billboard or two.
Really? Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen almost anything, but
not as much. But I mean, you know, Alexander Skarsgård, like, he's great, but like, he's not the name Will Smith is.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know they're about to release a Martin Scorsese movie in a couple months. That looks. I mean, we haven't seen anything. I don't know how it looks, but it's good cast. It's Martin Scorsese. I'm excited about that, and that's a big high-profile thing. But it kind of seems like Amazon really kind of has it down for the movies
game
because they release like Big Sick, Manchester by the Sea, movies that get nominated for Academy Awards or win Academy Awards. And Netflix had Mudbound, which did very well at this last Oscars.
Those were also released in theaters.
By Amazon.
So Netflix isn't...
No, except for Mudbound was
they did put
very limited to get an Academy run.
Beast on a Nation, right?
And I'm sure Scorsese's film next year will get a couple theaters.
I'm sure they're also banking on the fact that they hope at least that people will... that those movies are good enough that people will come over. I mean, let's be realistic. Who doesn't have a Netflix account? I feel like the majority of the people that they would want to be in part of their subscription service have a Netflix. But I imagine that part of that also is like, oh, well, if we can kind of show people that we can make real high quality original movies, then maybe more people will start to come in. But I don't know. I think right now for them, TV is really their skill set, and documentaries too. Yeah. But I mean,
and stand-up specials. My God.
Yeah.
8 stand-up specials every week. Some people I'm like, and me and Elizabeth work in comedy. Some people I'm like, I don't know who this is.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have a Netflix original stand-up special, which is good for them. 100% good for them. There's not shitting on them, but I'm just like, man.
Everyone gets one.
Everyone gets one.
You get a special. You get a special.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a bummer because I like Duncan Jones.
Yeah.
Me too.
But I mean, and about the moon connection, I'm like, it feels so
weird.
like random.
Does Sam Rockwell show up out of nowhere?
He's in it. Yeah, Sam Rockwell's definitely in it.
He's
like,
on a TV set in a future cafe.
Yeah.
That both of the main characters happen to be in for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then he looks over, and then the trial of Sam Rockwell is what's going on behind him.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an idea.
It doesn't work. For me, at least, like, it didn't work. It didn't feel like it made any sense. And it was like, why did you do this? What if there was like some greater reason to put Sam Rockwell and that movie into this universe? I wish it would have at least led to something, but it literally was just there.
It. No one mentioned it again.
No.
I'll tell you right now, y'all. If you haven't seen Moon, see Moon. Moon's great.
Moon's amazing. Great. It's different than, like, for example, Split. The very, very end, Bruce Willis, but it leads to Glass. This, they put Sam Rockwell in there. It doesn't lead to anything. It's just
yeah. You're not gonna get Moon 2.
Exactly.
More Moonin.
2 moons.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
I'll still try and check it out, but that's.
But I'm curious to see what you guys think. I'm sure there are people out there who probably took something completely different away from it. I'd really like to know what you guys thought about Mute.
Well, there we go. So moving on to our last film. Annihilation, written and directed by Alex Garland, starring Natalie Portman, Gina Rodriguez, Tessa Thompson,
Jennifer Jason Leigh,
Oscar Isaacs. A great cast. Based on a book, which is the first part of a trilogy. Although Alexander, I keep wanting to get Alexander Skarsgård. Yeah. Alex Garland said he hasn't read book 2 or 3. Yeah. He wanted to make a film.
I always feel like that's wise.
I do too, and that's caused a lot of people to be very angry at him who are fans of the book. And there's some controversies over that stuff, and I think we'll get into it.
Yep.
But generally, I don't know if you'd call it even a meteorite. Something crashes to Earth. It seems to be some kind of parasite. It starts to multiply. They send a army troop to investigate because it starts to create this shimmer glow effect that seems to be expanding. Oscar Isaac seems to be the leader of this group, who's married to Natalie Portman. Goes in, is gone for a year, comes back out, starts acting strange, hemorrhaging. Natalie Portman, they met in the army. She's a scientist. On the way to the hospital, she's picked up by his group, and they ask her to go in with a group of 4 other women to make it to the lighthouse where this meteorite crashed down. And along the way, they run into nightmare fuel and horror shows. The film is also partially an interrogation of Natalie Portman. What did she see? What was it like in there? What happened? And things of that nature. So let's talk about it. I love this fucking movie. I loved it. Yeah. We're gonna spoil some things because the things I loved we're spoiling. But initial reactions, I loved it. There's sequences that I think are great. I thought the cast was fantastic. I love Oscar Isaacs. The ending was weird and trippy in a way that I like. I like the interpretive nature of a lot of it. It does make me want to read the book, even if the book. What Garland has said is that he wanted to make a movie that it gave you the feeling that he read reading that first book, and that's why he didn't read the 2 sequels, and that's also why he didn't make a 1-to-1 translation of the book.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think especially with sci-fi, like Jurassic Park ends so differently from the novel.
Yes.
And like if you were trying to line it up with Lost World, you couldn't have had that movie.
No, you could not have.
Sorry. So I do feel like that's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, and I agree, and I'm a big proponent of not that the movies need to be different from the books, but it's not a problem for me. Jaws is very different from its book. The Shining is famously very different from its book. Francis Ford Coppola famously called the Godfather novel trash, and it was a huge hit.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I love the story. It's like one time he saw that movie on cable and was like, oh, this is a good movie, and then after 10 minutes he realized it was his book and got mad and turned it off.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting because and so I'm a firm believer in, like, of course, like, not that you need to change the book, but if you change the book and you made a good movie, that's okay. I think there's a lot of people who get very now, because we do live in a post Harry Potter Hunger Games world where they're like, we're going to make the book exactly. Yeah. Like point by point, beat by beat, all the characters are going to be in here. We're going to drop hints in film 1 about stuff that's going to happen in film 5 because it was in the book. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but now I think fans are like, you need to just make the book. I want to just see the book on screen translated exactly. And when it's not that, I'm upset.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people who are fans of the book have said that they thought it did a good job getting the themes and ideas, and certain, like, for example, Jennifer Jason Leigh had a longer backstory in the book that apparently in the film is almost hinted at, and some you could walk away from the movie being like, I bet, and you'd be right because that is in the book, but they didn't show that to you. So for example, spoiler, she's a very, like, repressed Zen, but not in a positive way, like a negative Zen type character, as the psychologist, which I found interesting that in the book apparently they're just called the biologist, the psychologist. They don't have names.
They don't have names.
Interesting.
No definition of who they are other than their title.
Yeah. So and seems to very much volunteer herself in this, like, I don't give a shit kind of way. It's here, and I have to go in because I've been working from outside for so long. And in the book they go into that she had already been inside a little bit, and that is why she has cancer. And that might also be why she's so, like, dead behind the eyes, is because she already has that part of it in her mentally. And in the book and in the movie you can kind of get that,
right? But she's so close to it where she's
they
stationed.
don't go into it.
Yeah,
like they hint at it, but we don't need a whole backstory because it's a film and it's paced at a certain way.
And Garland, he very much he, as a filmmaker, and that's worth noting, he was a novelist first. He was a novel writer. He wrote The Beach, which then Danny Boyle he adapted his own book, and Danny Boyle made the film. And then him and Danny Boyle worked together because Garland wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine. He would then go on to do a number of things. Judge Dredd, he did the most recent Dredd movie, and then he did his debut with Ex Machina. Although now there's been some debate that he might have actually directed Dredd.
Yep.
And that
which makes total sense.
Yeah. Now that you've seen the other 2 movies, I'm like, yeah, actually, there's a lot of things here that feel like him. But I feel like he, at the end of the day, is sort of a fan of Tarkovsky because Sunshine is essentially kind of Solaris. And Annihilation is like a lot like the Intruder or the Stranger. I can't remember the name of the Tarkovsky movie.
It has bits of Solaris in it as well.
It does. But anyway, yeah, I'm going on and on. Elizabeth, what did you think of the film?
I thought it was great. I know everyone loved Ex Machina, and I liked Ex Machina, but one of my biggest problems with it was that Oscar Isaac just told you everything. He just told you every theme, every idea. He explained it to you in a very lengthy way. I felt like it leaned too heavily on show not tell, to the point where it's just like, I get it. I get what she represents.
What about that great gifable dance sequence?
No, that was fun. I liked that movie, but that was like where that frustrated me about it as a viewer. I feel like this Annihilation does it a little bit, but it doesn't do the and therefore this. You'll like there's a beautiful scene where I forget the name of the character, the other white girl besides Natalie Portman.
Peters or something like that? Yeah.
So they're rowing a boat through this bizarre alien beautiful swamp forest land, and she talks about her losing her daughter, and that's why she's here. And she's like, no one would be here if we didn't have something messed up about our lives, and describes the other characters. And then Natalie Portman says, sorry for losing your daughter. And she says, yeah, well, it's kind of like there were two deaths that day, my daughter and who I used to be. And that theme comes into play constantly because we learn through a series of juxtaposed shots that in a way, Oscar Isaac's who he used to be was dead once he learned about her affair. So that version of himself was never coming back. And they show that by juxtaposing when he goes in, to cuts back to that affair, to her going in and cuts to that affair. So no one comes out and tells you, like, you know, just like when we're in here, we're not going to be the same people because people are affected by their decision. Like they don't explain. And I was so happy that they let art direction take that over.
Yes, this movie plays a lot with, in some ways where people go duh, but I think it actually does it in subtle ways too, about doubles and doppelgangers and this kind of stuff, and connection and disconnection and all these kinds of things. And yeah, in some ways that are obvious, where Natalie Portman is like, she's a professor, so she's like, this is a cell splitting, it's identical, but it's not. And you can go like, that's obvious. But then there's stuff where it's like the two deer and all this other stuff, and what do those represent? Is it just two deer? Is it this? Is that? A friend of ours who I did not see this post till this morning, otherwise I would have said, you need to come and be on the show, talk about this. She said she was moved by this movie because she found each of the women represent a different form of depression that women go through. And I found that fascinating.
Well, I've also seen comparisons to Jung in the movie as well.
Yes.
And I mean, self-destruction is a big theme. And that's the biggest, this is what this movie is about talk we get. And I didn't mind it. It came from Jennifer Jason Leigh, and because her character's so like kind of depressed, she did it in this flippant way where I didn't feel preached to as a moviegoer.
Yeah.
And then they cut it off with an action scene.
Yes.
Which I always feel like is a very smart thing to do in movies. If a character is getting too explanatory, just like have something come after them.
Yeah. What did you think of the film, Adam?
I loved it. This was another movie where I went on Twitter afterwards, and a lot of people were saying it was a pretentious piece of art. I was like, what? I'm like, why? No, I really, really, really dug this movie, and I really did like Ex Machina, Dread. 28 Days Later. I mean, he didn't direct that one, but he wrote it. He's really strong.
Kaiju cameo happening.
Really strong writer. Hi, Kaiju. But the thing that, I really like the fact, and talking about, how he made this movie.
Yeah.
A lot of some people really got on his ass about it, and he wrote the movie based on a manuscript of the first book.
So I guess it's worth saying. Yeah. So there has been some controversy about the film. It's not necessarily that you didn't adapt it. So this movie had some people were calling it another whitewashing, another Ghost in the Shell movie, because in the apparently like Elizabeth was saying in the first book, nobody's really described. It's just their positions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
In the second book, we find out her character is actually is an Asian person. Is Asian. And so a lot of people were...
And I think Jennifer Jason Leigh is Native American,
or half.
I believe. Yeah.
And so a lot of people were saying, calling out Natalie Portman. They were saying it's another Ghost in the Shell. And both Portman and him, Garland came out and said, and they said they'd only read the manuscript of the first book. Very apologetic about it. A lot of the other cast also tried to come out, like Tessa Thompson and Gina Rodriguez, being like a Latino and an African American person. Also the fact that I would actually point out the Red Letter Media guys did a really great video reviewing the movie where they talk about that the film passes the Bechdel test. It's 5 smart women that lead this movie. None of them are stupid or do stupid things. They have deep conversations about science, and it comes out.
One does a sort of stupid thing, but she's under a lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress. A lot of stress. Been there maybe 4 to 8 days, depending on how long they slept, because they have no memory of it. That it's a hard sci-fi movie that's asking deep questions, and it comes out the same weekend that the Oscars is going on about women and women power and more roles for women, and this movie bombs and no one cares and no one talks about it except film geeks. And their basic point was like, people want those things if it's in a Marvel and a Star Wars movie, and then when an actual movie comes out on the big screen with all the things they want, no one cares, no one wants to go, and people go, it's pretentious.
Well, I mean, this doesn't kind of have the marketing of a Ghostbusters.
No.
It also doesn't have the name Ghostbusters
No.
Ghostbusters.
Well, it also
doesn't have a bunch of hot comedians pushed in.
No.
It doesn't have, I mean, we're in the comedy community, so maybe we hear it more there. So like the comedian women I know who are like very into that stuff probably don't see this kind of movie.
No.
So I don't. Yeah, I mean it's kind of.
And they didn't use it as their marketing. Their marketing was whatever you think of Ghostbusters. At the end of the day, they did use the women power as a marketing thing. It was later revealed that the little girls at the premiere who were dressed up as Ghostbusters, Sony had paid them, and that's nothing on Paul Feig or the actresses who are in Ghostbusters or the fact that they want to make Ghostbusters.
Part of the marketing of getting people to come to the movie,
and it's also Sony, the same studio that keeps making Adam Sandler movies and ruining Spider-Man. So let's not act surprised that they're gross. And that they decided to use this as a marketing tool. Paramount and Garland, and it's worth saying the rest of the world, which is Netflix. Netflix got this movie everywhere else except here. Did not use that as a marketing. The marketing was not a movie with 5 women saving the world. Or attempting to save the world.
Well, that was sort of like, I found it refreshing. You watch that movie, there is not one white male character in a leading role. They are featured in the movie as extras or background characters, or some of them were part of like the.
You're right. Actually, all the major male speaking roles.
David Gyasi was the guy that Natalie Portman had an affair with. Benedict Wong was the one interrogating her. Oscar Isaac played the husband, and then you have these 5 women.
I think the only white guy is the guy who gets his guts cut open and his intestines are snakes. Which, what did you think of that scene?
That was crazy. That was so gross.
I'm watching this movie. I've known Elizabeth 16 years. I'm watching this movie. I'm like, this is an Elizabeth scene where she'd go like,
the reveal of the flower mold spore thing of the guy was just so great.
The art direction in this movie, for a movie that has a lot of,
so good,
and that's why I love Garland's work, because he has a lot of what could just be horror sequences. In 28 Days Later, I mean, 28 Days Later is a straight horror movie, but it's also saying things. Sunshine is this kind of weird science fiction movie that kind of turns into a slasher thing, but it's trying to say stuff. And I love about this is like stuff that could easily just be, for lack of a better, red and black. Like they could have found the body and it's just in dark and it's red and black, brightly lit room, and it's like purple and pink and these spores.
Well, not just that, but how many times have we seen like a sci-fi sort of movie where it's supposed to be like a beautiful science fiction-y alien jungle and it just looks awful.
Very generic.
It could just so easily look awful. And they're walking through this alien swamp with flowers everywhere, and it looks good.
My taste, it easily could have gone into garish, and it didn't, and that was great. I want to talk about the bear sequence. The bear in the house.
Still has nightmares about the bear.
People who hate this movie, okay. But if you're a horror person or into anything like that, how you could walk away and be like, and not think about that bear sequence as maybe one of the coolest nightmare fuel sequences ever. That was so well done and so creepy. The fact that they gave the bear this like voice that's saying, screaming, "Help me!"
and you don't even understand what happened. And you have ideas, and then later they discuss what happened in the movie, and it's not even quite what you thought happened. Okay, so when the bear appeared and you realized it was her voice in the bear, what did you think was happening?
Well, at that point, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about the movie, is that it kind of starts building to this degree where it's like, okay, these things are kind of molding together. We got the alligator with the teeth, the man in the wall, the plants are imitating people. When that happened, and then it has the skull face thing, I was like, this is fucked, but so cool. What I thought was happening was, I think I think it was good. They held back. I thought it was going to get worse in that I thought like it would have like human arms out of the bottom of its stomach or something.
Okay, but like, were also, for example, at that point in the film, I thought, oh, this is a hybrid of this person memory and a bear, like sort of an Animorphs thing where it's like a hellscape where she's like being like, kill me, like she's saying help me to him.
I didn't think
that's what I thought.
That's cool. I thought
and
it was.
And then when they discussed it, they're just like, no, that emotion or fear plus her voice got merged with this bear, so it's not like her.
Well, also when they find her body, her throat's ripped out.
Yeah. So it's not like when I first saw that, and then later they explained like, no, it's like not her thoughts in the bear. It's just that fear, those words.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how much sense that makes, but I don't care.
I'm willing to go with it because it's so well done and so creepy.
That was terrifying. I remember. So I went to go see it with Naeem, and like that's all he thought about. That's all he's been thinking about for the last week is that scene, and it's so great because it's really good. It's unexpected, and it is doing something a little bit new and like weird.
Yeah,
and I like that. Like I don't like going into movies that are like this sci-fi fantasy genre, and it's always like it tries to always just be logical and very like not middle of the road, but something that's like predictable almost, whereas this was just like, let's do weird, new, crazy like concepts and let's throw it out there and see what people think. And I love that.
Crystal trees on the beach.
All of that was great. The getting to that moment in the lighthouse was great. And then I want to talk about the lighthouse because the lighthouse I felt like the most impacted, or like I have the most thoughts about the lighthouse scene. So Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, the psychologist, when she has that face with the mouths and then turns and becomes herself again. So she's become, I heard someone like describe it in like sort of a psychology way where it's like basically trying to, once you've merged with something but you've lost your individuality. So what separates you is still the wanting to be an individual. But if you've become enough of this thing, so she says like, I wanted to know what this was, but that moment has passed, meaning too much of the thing is in her, and she's not an individual anymore. And then what did you think of the eye? That was its Tree of Life 2001 moment. I think really was when it just became the giant blob of colors staring at Natalie Portman.
I dug that.
Then it did the meta thing where it stared at the audience, which I loved.
I dug that.
It's like a little cheesy, but I liked it.
I'm for it. I dug that. The doppelganger creature, that
was the creepiest part to me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then this is probably a very dumb interpretation, but there's so the opposite of a straw man argument is called a steel man argument, which is supposed to mean where you give someone because a straw man is being like, so basically you're saying this dumb thing and you're wrong because of this, misrepresenting their argument.
Yes.
So steel man is representing their argument to be the best possible argument that it could be. And then once they say, yes, that is my argument, then you show them why they're wrong.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with the design or not, but it's just kind of interesting that it's this metallic person mirroring her until it gets to the point where she tries to go away or do something else, and then it stops her.
Yeah, I thought that was all that stuff was really great, and it actually kind of reminded me of another sci-fi movie. If you liked Annihilation, for me, I recommend. It reminded me a lot of Under the Skin.
Haven't seen it.
The Scarlett Johansson movie, because there's a mild spoiler for Under the Skin. Once Scarlett Johansson reveals what she is, it's not metallic, but it's very similar to kind of this bald creature kind of a thing that's kind of got this weird. There's a weird sadness to the creature, like it just doesn't know what's happening, kind of a thing, and it's fascinating in that way. What did you think of the Oscar Isaac stuff in the Lighthouse?
So I thought that was great. I thought how freaked out she is when she sees the clone, and you don't even register it, but like they do the sound mixing so that when he says like, and if you see Lena, tell her this, and you hear his voice from back here go, I will, and then he shows up, but like it's so weird that you don't even think about it until he shows up. That was great. When the thing's on fire, it touches his head like in a tender moment.
Yeah.
and then it's supposed to be like her and then it goes into the hole with once it's on fire.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we can analyze this all day, I'm sure.
Well, I think that's why I love the movie, is I love that you can like look at this kind of stuff and go, what did this mean, and what did you take away, and this is what it was, and blah 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 blah.
And it's got a lot of layers to it, but I thought what I loved about it is it takes those layers at the beginning and introduces them slowly, and then at the end they're all piled in together, and it all pays off.
Yes.
So it doesn't like drop anything that it brought up. It doesn't drop any themes. It doesn't drop anything that it set up. It brings that all together to a point in the final climax.
And the second person the bear kills, that was brutal.
Yeah, oh yeah.
The attack, holy crap.
I will say that I didn't love the last shot. That was the only.
Oh, the eyes. I could see.
I feel like that. I feel like you could have just ended on the hug.
Yeah. I didn't. For a movie that had like a lot of scenes I loved, I didn't feel anything at that, so I can see what you're saying. Like, I didn't dislike it, but I didn't really. It wasn't a thing where the credits went and I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what you would want.
I think just the hug was so awkward and sad.
Yeah.
That ending on that would have been great, and we didn't need the like do eyes, because it was like a little.
Plus,
yeah,
like, I
can see that.
This movie ended, and the first thing that I absolutely did not think of was, I want a sequel. I don't want this book series to become a trilogy. And I don't think Alex Garland ever had that intention, because there was no trilogy when he originally wrote it. So to me, it was like I think
that's the thing. That's where people might go like, well, how's that possible? How long did it take him to write it? The book series kind of became a big deal because the writer had apparently written all three, kind of like a Tolkien style thing, written all three, and then released them all in 1 year, like boom, boom, boom. So people were, so people were like, they read one, and then the next one was out 3 months later. So they were all released like boom, 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 kind of a thing.
Whereas, like, if you're a director writing a script
and you get a manuscript,
you're not doing that. You're basing off a manuscript, and you're gonna go off and shoot that version, whatever you wrote. But I totally agree with what you said earlier when you said, nowadays I definitely feel like people want page for page adaptations of books, and I'm like, I don't. That's why a lot of times I don't read the book before I go see the movie.
I never do, because I find this is the conversation I tend to find a lot of the times is if people, and it's different if like you read the book and then 5 years later they make the movie. That's totally different bag of worms. But like whenever it's like there's a movie coming out and people are like, oh, I got to make sure I read the book first. The conversation is always the same after they see the movie.
I thought the book was better.
I thought the book was not just I thought the book was better.
Yeah.
Oh, it was missing this and this, and I kept waiting for that part, and this didn't happen. I didn't like this character as much as the book, because in the book they're this and the other. Whereas if you watch the movie first, I found, and then read the book, people go, wow, what an experience. It seems to be a more positive experience reading the book after.
Yeah, because it's adding details.
Yes. Exactly. And that's always been my thing. And people always ask me like, well, don't you care about how the movie influences the book for you? I'm like, no, because the book is a completely different thing. It's a different art form. It can be way longer, and you get a lot more explanation, so you have a different sort of appreciation for how someone took a book or a manuscript for a book or whatever and was able to take that and condense it down to actually make it a coherent movie.
And I believe Zach read the book, and he did love the movie too, as we're saying. But he was telling me, and I haven't read the book yet, but he was telling me it's dense. Like, it is a dense sci-fi book.
Yeah, that's what I heard from a lot of people.
Yeah, you would have to cut it down and hint at some things. And I would say the times where it's kind of a bummer when a movie adapts a book is when, like, clearly because the genre's popular, they're like redoing it just to fit that genre and kind of make money and cash in, and not respecting the material.
Like when The Giver became a young adult adventure film,
or when Ender's Game became a young adult adventures film. Whereas like this, I think it seems like he's really trying to stay true to the themes and meaning of the book and make his best version of that.
Yes.
Versus, what's popular? What's a book I can option that kind of fits that, or I can force
that I
into
can kind
it.
of push and Play-Doh it in. Yeah. Tessa Thompson was great. I loved her scene where she just decides she's not gonna. She doesn't want to fight it. She doesn't want to face it. She's
just gonna walk on. Let it consume me.
And I really like Natalie Portman in this. I know Natalie Portman can sometimes. She kind of has a little bit of the DiCaprio thing where like they're really trying sometimes, and I think that might come from being a child actor. She's certainly done great in some films, but I thought
she did well in this.
Yeah, I thought she did really well in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm really looking forward to seeing it again. And the funny thing is, it's one of those funny things where we didn't get it on Netflix. We got it in theaters. No one went to go see it. Europe is getting it on Netflix, and they're demanding it go to theaters.
They're all watching it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the thing that, like...
I can't imagine just seeing it for the first time on Netflix.
It sucks, man. I mean, I can't imagine, like...
This is a really, theater movie.
It's such
sound design.
It's such a theater movie. The soundtrack.
Zach was super important.
Zach was changing stuff here in the studio, and he had the soundtrack playing, and it, like... You sit, and I was just sitting in the chair in the hallway just listening, and it's just such a like moving experience just listening to the music. And it's a huge bummer that the movie didn't get any sort of theatrical distribution overseas, and it sucks because it's a movie that has such a diverse cast, and it's led by an incredible cast of people, and people are always demanding it. But it seems like they're only demanding it when it's Marvel, DC, or Star Wars, and it's like if you want to see more of that stuff in movies, you need to go support all of them. Doesn't matter how like weird you think the movie is. You should just go experience the movie. It's a great experience, and the movie ends, and you are gonna sit there and you're gonna think about the movie. You're gonna ask questions about the movie. To me, that's a sign of a really good movie when you sit there and you're interested in the movie and the material enough that 1, you want to read the book, 2, you want to go see what other work this director's done, and 3, the movie makes you think. The movie shouldn't just end, go to credits, and you're like, well, that was fun. Let's go. There are movies that are very much for that, but this particular movie and this director, like, it's a different type of movie.
It's a movie you also clearly want to talk about once it's over. You don't want to be like, well, that was good. Let's go get some burgers.
Exactly. Naeem and I walked out of the movie, and the whole route to the car, we were just like, oh man, this scene and that scene and this and that, like these themes, and it's just such a rich movie. It was so good.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to go see it again.
Yeah.
I know a number of people who haven't seen it yet, and I want to just be like, come on.
I want to just drag people to that movie, man.
But yeah, oh god, that bear sequence,
so great.
That's the one I'll just keep going. I'm like, that was so well done.
But also, it's worth mentioning, like the shimmer itself, and we touched on it a little bit, but like the design, it's like simplistic, but it's altered enough, and they use color and stuff just well enough that it doesn't seem overdone. It's very tastefully done, and it doesn't feel like it's a big CG sort of mishmash of stuff. It's very, very just like subtly, tastefully done, and when they do exaggerate it, it's justified and it feels right. Because he does a lot of that. There was also things in like Judge Dredd where it very much plays with like this idea of like this like shimmer and color, and it just works so extremely well, and it was really, really well done.
This is the kind of movie where it's like, because they release art books for like all the big Disney movies, and it's like the art design book of blah blah blah. Like if they release like an art book of this where it's like the designers are like, here's my different interpretation of the bear creature or the deer or this and the other, I'm like, I want that book.
Yeah. No, they did an excellent job.
Really well done. Yeah.
So Annihilation, go see it. We want to hear what you guys think. If you saw it, if you didn't see it, go see it.
Signal boost that damn movie.
Yeah, if you live overseas and you're watching it on Netflix, let us know how it worked. For you at home watching it there, for sure. So as far as next week goes, I got the required viewing pick. So I wanted to pick another strange esoteric film that's not going to be like anything that we're going to go see in theaters.
Great.
Yeah, I wanted to watch Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Okay, cool.
Colin Farrell and Nicole Kidman, from the director of Dogtooth and The Lobster, his new film. So I wanted to watch that. I saw it in theaters and I loved it. Again, strange and esoteric and all this other stuff. So I want to have you guys watch it. I want to have you two watch it. And we're going to talk about that next week. Cool. So that's going to require viewing. And then as far as the big movies that are out, Adam, we have a couple options.
Yeah, it's an interesting week because like Wrinkle in Time came out. Thinking about maybe discussing that, but then this week we've also got Tomb Raider, and Love, Simon is out.
Love, Simon.
So I think I don't know. Do we know exactly what we want to talk about, or do we want to kind of leave it open?
We might leave it open.
Yeah.
If you guys have a preference, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
But because I mean, I know Hector talked about Wrinkle in Time on Hyper Heroes a bit.
Yeah, he really liked it.
But so I mean, I'm down to see that. We do Tomb Raider's out, which is getting okay reviews.
Yeah.
So that might be the best video game movies maybe we're talking about.
Who knows? We might each watch at least one of those movies. So we might have 3 different movies to come talk about. But we'll see.
Yeah, the options vary. They may be.
Yeah.
So we're gonna for sure Killing of a Sacred Deer, and then we will figure out the other film. Let us know in the comments, and we will let you know what we've decided on.
Yeah.
And then obviously, if there's any other big movie news, we will talk about all that. Elizabeth, where can people find you online? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me online, Ford Prefix Kid, Twitter and Instagram.
Adam?
You can just find me here on Hyper Heroes every single week, and go check out our Avengers Infinity War trailer reaction. Get it to another 1 million views.
As for me, twitter.com/Jurassic Alien. Go on there. You'll see me promoting all kinds of stuff, the horror show, Power Rangers, all those kinds of things. So head over there, and if you see any of the movies we talked about, let us know what you thought about it. We want to hear from you. Thank you guys so much, and keep it here at Hyper RPG. Woo!